Somewhere in southern Iraq, 5,500 years ago, a person stood over wet clay. The disc turned. The clay walls rose evenly. Thin. Symmetrical. This person was doing something no creature had done in 4 billion years of life on Earth. They were controlling sustained circular rotation to accomplish a task. The potter was just making a jar. They had no idea what they had. But a spinning pottery disc was about to become the most transformative mechanical invention in history. The wheel looks obvious. A circle. A hole. Something to turn. Children draw wheels. The shape is everywhere in nature. And yet, for the first 99% of human existence, nobody made one. Not a single functional transport wheel appears anywhere until 5,500 years ago. So why did it take so long? The answer is not what most people assume. Start with what life looked like before the wheel existed. For 300,000 years, everything that moved was either carried or dragged. Water came from rivers in clay pots, balanced on heads, carried on shoulders. Hunters who killed a large animal had to butcher it where it fell, carry pieces home by hand. Building materials, firewood, harvested grain, all moved on human backs. Every kilogram moved from one place to another cost a specific amount of human energy. And human energy was finite. This gave civilization a ceiling. You could only build cities as large as the surrounding land could supply by foot and shoulder. The entire ancient world was physically constrained by the human body. The first solution was not the wheel. It was the sledge, a flat platform on runners. It distributed load weight across a broad surface. Egyptian workers poured water onto clay paths in front of sledge runners. 50 people could drag a 2.5-ton stone block across wet clay with manageable effort. But on dry ground, dragging anything generates enormous resistance. Moving a 1,000 kilograms block across dry ground requires a sustained force of 500 kilograms. Not small group work. Oxen helped. One ox pulls 3 to 5 times more than an adult human. But harnessing an ox to a sledge on dry ground still meant fighting friction the whole way. The conceptual key to escaping friction already existed in nature, and people had seen it for thousands of years. Logs roll. Ancient humans discovered that placing round logs under heavy stones transformed the effort needed. Rolling reduces friction because a rolling object continuously lifts its contact point off the ground. Rolling requires roughly 1/30th of the force needed to slide the same load. But loose rollers have a fatal problem. As the load moves forward, the rollers stay behind. Constant repositioning. Turning was almost impossible. On soft ground, the rollers sank. The roller system showed that rolling reduces friction. It did not solve how to make rolling continuous. The insight required was specific and genuinely non-obvious. If you fix a roller in place so it cannot move across the ground, but allow it to rotate around a central axis, a platform resting on it will move forward as the roller turns, without the roller traveling along the ground. A rolling log moves along the ground. A wheel turns around a fixed point. Completely different ideas. The jump from rolling log to fixed rotating wheel requires understanding something abstract. That something can spin in place while another thing moves past it. That is a genuinely abstract idea, and it took a very long time to arrive. The oldest physical wheel ever found was pulled from a peat bog in Slovenia. Radiocarbon dated to 5,150 years ago. Made of 2 ash planks joined together. Solid. Heavy. Clearly the product of skilled carpentry. This was not someone's first attempt. Earlier pictographic evidence from ancient Uruk shows wheeled vehicles pulled by animals. But now here is the genuinely puzzling part. The potter's wheel appears earlier than the transport wheel. Clay spinning discs appear in Mesopotamia around 4,500 to 5,500 years ago. They introduced a specific idea, a disc rotating around a fixed central axis. The potter's wheel and the transport will share the same fundamental geometry. But moving from one to the other required flipping the axis of rotation 90 degrees and solving an entirely different set of structural engineering problems. A pottery disc can be made of heavy stone. A transport wheel has to be light but strong. The transport wheel needs a precisely fitted central bore for an axle. If the bore is off-center even slightly, the wheel wobbles with every turn. A wobbling wheel on a loaded cart destroys the axle quickly on rough ground. Achieving true concentricity in wood with hand tools requires years of developed skill. The wheel is not just a circle. It is a wheel and axle system. Together, they only work as one. The Ljubljana will use a square axle bore. Clever. Square corners are easier to cut than round holes. So why did the wheel take so long? This is the real answer. You needed a society complex enough to have full-time skilled woodworkers. You needed appropriate hardwoods, metal tools, or minimum high-quality polished stone tools. You needed draft animals large enough that wheeled transport was actually better than human carrying. And you needed relatively flat, firm ground that early wheeled vehicles could actually cross. Southern Mesopotamia in the 4th millennium BCE met all of these requirements simultaneously. The cities of Uruk and Kish had specialized craftspeople, copper tools, domesticated oxen, flat plains, an enormous economic demand for transport. Urban centers needed constant food inflows. An ox-drawn wagon could carry what 10 to 20 human porters could carry. Farm output that could supply a city effectively multiplied. Trade networks extended. Now, why did the wheel never appear in the Americas before European contact? This is not a question about intelligence. The Maya predicted solar eclipses centuries in advance. The Inca built road networks totaling tens of thousands of kilometers across impossible terrain. Archaeologists have found pre-Columbian ceramic toys in Mexico mounted on tiny functional axles and wheels. They understood the wheel. They simply did not scale it into transport vehicles. Because the Americas had no domesticable large draft animals. The horse had gone extinct in the Americas 10,000 years ago, almost certainly hunted out. Without an animal that can pull a heavy loaded cart, there is no compelling reason to build one. The Inca road network was designed specifically for human and llama travel. Staircases, narrow ledges. The infrastructure evolved to suit the available transport technology, not the other way around. Now the first wheels were solid discs, enormously heavy. A four-wheeled wagon with solid wooden wheels started its journey, carrying 160 kilograms of wheel weight alone. Then, around 2000 BCE, on the grasslands east of the Ural Mountains, something radical happened. The spoked wheel. The Sintashta culture discarded the solid disc almost entirely, replaced it with spokes. Spokes carry the load in tension, distributing stress across the entire structure. A spoked wheel weighs 3 to 5 kilograms. A solid disc of the same size weighs 30 to 50. Cut wheel weight by 90%, and you transform what a vehicle can do. The spoked wheel opened a new application nobody had anticipated. Warfare. A chariot pulled by 2 horses could reach 30 to 40 kilometers per hour. It could outflank infantry, deliver archers into range, withdraw before foot soldiers could respond. The chariots spread across Eurasia within centuries, reaching Greece, India, and China. Then the Celtic wheelwrights solved another problem. The wooden rim splitting under road shock. They forged an iron hoop slightly smaller than the wheel rim, heated it until it expanded, fitted it over the wooden rim, poured cold water on it. As the iron cooled, it contracted, binding the entire wheel structure into a rigid unit. And from the wheel, everything cascaded outward. The water wheel converted river flow into rotational energy to grind grain. Gears allowed rotational speed to be traded for torque, or torque for speed. The Antikythera mechanism, 80 BCE, contained 30 interlocking gear wheels. It could predict eclipse timing and astronomical positions decades in advance. From gears, the clock, the printing press, the steam engine, the electric generator, all descendants of the wheel. Remove the wheel from history and industrialization does not survive. The wheel is not merely useful. It is the functional foundation of machine civilization. And none of this was foreseeable. The first ancient human to load a grain sack onto a wheeled cart was solving a logistics problem, not building a foundation for industrial civilization. The wheel was not invented by a genius who saw the future. It was carved out of wood by someone trying to move grain without breaking their back. Every car on a highway today descends from a solid wooden disc mounted on a wooden axle 5,000 years ago. Every turbine spinning in a power plant. Every gear inside a clock. Every ball bearing in an electric motor. All carrying the same principle that an unknown craftsperson worked out in Mesopotamia 5,500 years ago. That is where civilization actually gets built. Not in a moment of inspiration, but in the accumulated effort of people refusing to accept the difficulty in front of them. If this changed how you see the circle, that is exactly what this channel is here for.